this episode from the Cyber Made Human launch party here in Cheltenham, I'm joined by the wonderful Cath Golding, who has an incredible amount of experience. We're talking how to communicate from CEOs to investors to end users to fellow techies, depending on who your audience is based on your business and your goals. Let's get started. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I'd love to start by just hearing a bit about your background. We're going to talk about how to communicate cyber, which is not just to kind of non-techies. We're covering everything from CEOs to investors to key stakeholders to fellow techies. And you've got a wealth of experience. So to begin with, just tell us a bit about who you are and your background, please.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
I got into the cybersecurity profession by accident, I think as a lot of people my age did. I did a maths degree and was privileged enough to work at GCHQ. And back in sort of the year 2000, cybersecurity wasn't even a thing. It was information assurance, network defense. And I was working in research at the time, and I was sort of asked to join this very new team to work on what is now cybersecurity.
Right.
It was very much in its infancy then, so it's been just fantastic watching how it's grown, although also very scary.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked there for about 10 years. I worked abroad for a time, so had a great time, but did feel you're slightly in a bubble.
Right.
As you walk in the doors. Security is everything. It's sort of in your DNA for everybody from, you know, the directors down to the people that serve coffee and the cleaners. They're all cleared. So I wanted to experience life in the real world.
Yeah.
So for the last 10 years, I've worked in CNI, Critical National Infrastructure organisations, and heading up the security in those. So yes, it's been quite an exciting ride.
Yes. When you say you came out of the bubble, I remember we talked a bit about this before, but you actually then went to critical infrastructure. So I do imagine that they still have quite a level of understanding, or at least the people at a certain level do. What would you say? It's not entirely going from GCHQ to commercial.
There were some moments where I called it my patio door moment.
Okay.
When you walk into something that you didn't expect. Where for something that seems sort of obvious in terms of checking your employees or putting some security controls in place. So that was kind of quite early on, but I quickly learned that and that's the kind of main thing I'd really like to talk about is cyber's just not a technical thing, malware and things like that. It's a business risk.
Right.
And so, yes, over the years, I think as a CISO, you really have to translate that risk into what it means into business risk.
Yeah. And when you say it's a business risk, I think in Cheltenham, we often actually hear it's a business asset. We hear secure by design, and that's kind of like something people will use to market the team that they have when they're building technology, that's kind of just part of everything that they build. It's secure because most of them have worked at GCHQ when they go on to commercial companies. People outside that remit, aside from national infrastructure or maybe within that space as well, there needs to be a lot more education about cybersecurity.
Yes, definitely. And I think you're right in the kind of secure by design. That is, the kind of utopia that we don't have to sell it. It is just built as being secure, but unfortunately, in my experience, it's not always the case.
Right.
And it's primarily due to financial reasons. CEOs will want to sweat assets. They'll want to make as much money as possible, and sometimes that means sweating the assets, and they might be more difficult to secure. So you find yourself sometimes, it's easier when you've got a team and they're developing. A new product, a new service, and it is about inserting yourself. And like you say, you should be an asset. This should be something that is sold.
Right.
In terms of this product, whatever it is. It's also secure. Not that the customer is always on board with that because it might cost more. But yes, it's often easier to get in there from the beginning, whereas when you've got these kind of legacy systems that are kind of crumbling and they'll cost a fortune, that's where some of the real challenges lie. And it's where yes, certainly with the CEO, the executive and the board, you have to present the risks in a way, because you can't fix everything.
No.
And that is the thing with cyber. And I think one of the things we've got wrong in terms of we need to be bulletproof. Everything's got to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. So you've got choices to make. Where do you put your money? Where do you put the resources? What is the biggest risk and what means the most to you? So yeah, a lot of it is about translating that data and the decisions. I remember doing my maths degree, decision making under uncertainty, and I think that's really what being a CISO is about in terms of presenting the options, in terms of what you will get back from an asset and from a security perspective.
So we're going to talk through a couple of examples of communicating to different people. So imagine if you are in a board meeting talking to a CEO. M&S CEO might listen to you this week, but prior to this week they might not. What would your job as the CISO or as the technical person who's talking to a CEO who's really profit driven, is in a really unpredictable market, is maybe having to make cuts to the team, if you're going in and saying, I want to use M&S as an example, we need to invest, or maybe I've answered your question, but how would you present that to someone who doesn't care about cyber and just cares about profit?
It's a really good question, and there's no easy answer. I think a lot of time it's all about, you want to produce metrics, just like the CFO will produce, charts in terms of, how the finances are going, how our profit margins are doing. And you want to show progress in the same vein, which is actually really hard. So, say, for example, you're not doing any monitoring, and so suddenly you put in a monitoring system. And so you're detecting loads of things, loads of incidents. And one week you detect 50 incidents, and the next week you detect 80 incidents. Does that mean you're getting better at detecting them, or does it mean you're getting less secure because you're having more incidents? So there's a lot of nuances in the metrics. And what I've found in my experience is it is, and this is all about, cyber made human. I think too often in cybersecurity we forget the human element, and it is about technology and a lot of, the cybersecurity industry is thriving. It's fantastic, and I think certainly in the UK it's great to see all these, small businesses popping up and growing. It's absolutely fantastic, but in my view, sometimes what they get wrong is that it's their fear factor. They're selling with this fear, FUD, fear, uncertainty and doubt. Oh my God, you've got to have that. And it's really enticing as a CISO, oh yeah, we need to buy that because that'll decrease the risk. But actually, what I like to do with the board and the exec is to kind of talk about, I like to compartment it into the human elements. So, because there's always a person behind it. And so whether it's, like I say, I work in CNI, so there's a big concern about state-sponsored attacks. I mean, with the Spain outage, the power outage, I work in the energy sector at the moment, and, there are questions, is it a cyber attack? And that's really concerning because we rely so much on technology.
Do you think it could be a cyber attack?
It's possible. I think they're saying they've ruled it out, but certainly that is a big concern for for the energy sector and for the government. There's a lot of regulation and a lot of pressure. But yes, it's sort of like if you have, if you're up against the Russians or the Chinese and you're a company, it's going to be very, very hard to stop them because if they're targeting you and they're motivated. So you've got to kind of look, what's the return on the investment on that side? But, to your example, it's very good with Marks and Spencer's. It's far more likely that a company is going to be vulnerable to a ransomware attack. So I think it's really, really important to go through that scenario with the exec and the board and what they would actually do. Because I do believe the criminals are actually more at, it's an arms race, right, between, the cybersecurity professionals and the criminals and the capabilities always, who's better at it. But I think they have got better at their business model because it used to be that, never pay the ransomware because they won't give you the data back, and you are, I used to sort of feel, over my dead body, do you want to pay a ransom, because you're giving them money to then go and attack other people. But the criminals have got a lot more clever, and they will choose the money appropriately for you, and they will give you the money back, and there's lawyers involved. It's fascinating, that kind of world. So you need to talk to the exec in terms of what would you do, and do you need insurance and all those sort of things.
The Cyber Made Human podcast is produced by Alice Violet Creative, my content marketing agency based in Cheltenham. We specialise in complex brands, which primarily means those in emerging technologies, cybersecurity and intelligence. We're able to take abstract, clinical and difficult topics and make beautiful, compelling and results-driven content. So get in touch with us for digital marketing and all your content needs. So if you were in a board meeting, you've got the CTO, the CMO, you've got everybody around the room, and you've only got a quick sentence to speak to the CEO who's making costs. What would your key message be for why we shouldn't cut the cyber team, for example?
The disruption, basically.
So it's a protection thing.
Yeah, and I think that cybersecurity is moving more into a resilience, so it's coming closer to like business continuity. So like I say, we've been so focused on the kind of detect and protect and buying, things that will hopefully mitigate things, but actually it's about risk, and it's about how you respond. Unfortunately Marks and Spencer's, they've had to shut everything off, and I read the Co-op are going through something similar. They've had to shut down their IT systems. So increasingly my job is about, it's not just cyber, it's about IT failure or supplier failure, and it's communicating to the business, particularly the chief operations officer and the CEO and people like that. Like, are you prepared? Because if there is a cyber attack, yes, the cyber team and the IT team will be working, to try and get everything, back up and running as quickly as possible. But how does the business continue to operate without losing, mass money and customers and things like that? Because actually if an incident is managed well, it doesn't necessarily have to be detrimental. And then in terms of investors, I guess, is that a similar decision, if similar communication? Because if you are talking to like a cyber startup, for example, and they're trying to get investment, or maybe a tech startup that just needs to consider their cyber element, how would you communicate to their investor about the importance of this, who's super profit driven, maybe even more so than the CEO? Yeah, I mean, I think the market is going into verticals. So I think it is about absolutely knowing your customer. And I used to be a mentor on this Cylon program. Sorry, I know this is Cynam. But it's sort of know who your customers are and what you're trying to mitigate. I think too often, startups and companies, they'll be selling in terms of like, oh, there's so many incidents, it costs this much, and it's really bad. Fear, uncertainty and doubt again. And actually it's like, I am a customer, and I want to know what you are doing for me. So which controls are you improving? What is going to be my return on investment? And I think investors will want to know that as well. I mean, we have a joke in the kind of CISO community. There's loads of buzzwords like AI and blockchain and things like that, which, yes, absolutely has its place, and that's really great. And maybe that will entice the investors because it sounds all, new and exciting. But for CISOs, it's often like, oh, here we go again. What are you actually trying to do? You want to know the proof, and it's really difficult in cybersecurity because how do you test it on a real world scenario?
Okay, and then finally, I guess, how would you communicate to an end user who isn't technical at all? So this is just maybe a small business owner who knows they need cybersecurity, whatever that is, and they don't actually understand what they need, why they need it, what the right product to invest in is. They don't want scaremongering. What's the key?
I think the key you know, like I say, cyber and technology is so integrated in our lives, and too often people are scared by it. Oh, cyber security, oh, you have to be a cyber ninja and know about cryptography and things like that.
Yeah.
So they'll be put off by it. It's not that scary. It is just, you know, another risk that you should be considering. So I think just like, you know, how you look after your house and your car, you don't want to be vulnerable to that kind of opportunist type attack.
Right.
So you want to make sure you lock things up, and you know how you look after your phone. You know, crime with phones being taken is massively on the increase, and so much of our lives is around the phone. So for a small business, I think it's expanding that in terms of like, what is important to you, and what would you do if it did come under attack, and also some of the easy things that you need to do to protect it, like putting on two-factor authentication and making sure you're patching your system. So I think it's about keeping it, you know, like I say, it's not rocket science.
No.
You can do an awful lot, mitigate 90% by doing just some of the
Simple
basic
things,
stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice way of putting it, actually, by kind of talking about it as your laptop on your phone rather than data, which is the exact same thing, really.
Yeah.
But as soon as it becomes something physical that can be stolen, I think to an non-technical user, they get what you're saying then. It's just like an insurance of making sure it can't be stolen, basically.
Yes, I think you're right. You know, cybersecurity is often it's this abstract thing that you know, it's about malware and hacking that to most people walking down the street, you know, they don't understand it. But actually, like I say, it's not rocket science. It is just your, you know, it's your assets, it's your service, it's, you know, what you're doing, your IT, your data. And it's about doing the cyber hygiene.
Yes. I have got one more bonus question, actually, because I've just thought of it. As a marketer who's chosen this stunning venue to have a cyber security podcast and a cyber security event, and I've just been to UK Cyber Week, and we've got Cyber UK next week. When you walk around a lot of these conferences, Cynam do gorgeous events, so no shade to Cynam, but a lot of other events can be quite dry, gorgeous. What would you say in terms of what can the industry do? Because obviously we as an agency try to uplift and challenge people to do something a bit different. As someone who works for a cyber company, what do you think internally you can do to make yourselves more accessible and appealing externally?
Oh my gosh, I could talk for a long time about this. I mean, I'm from Yorkshire, so I like plain speaking. And I go around these conferences and you get the kind of sales pitch, and you kind of like, you want to get to the nub of what it is you're trying to offer.
You're right.
So try and look at it from our perspective, and particularly in the CNI space, we've got an awful lot of regulation and compliance to deal with, which is really good, you know, because it's a bit of a stick, but it is making, you know, CNI more secure. So it's kind of like, again, what is your return on investment? What are you looking, from my perspective, what are you mitigating and coming straight to it? And another one of my bugbears is give me an estimate of cost. I recently did one in my team did a proof of value for a data loss prevention tool, and it, you know, this was weeks worth of work, and it found some great stuff, and he was kind of like, Cath's going to ask how much, because, you know, I hold the purse, right, and so I've got to decide and propose where to spend the money. And when it came back, it was $500,000 a year, and I just couldn't, you know, I almost laughed. It was like, well, that is such a shame, because if you'd have told me that at the beginning, I'd have said, sorry, that's not for us, because it didn't, you know, the loss didn't equate to how much it was, you know, the cure's got to be better than the...
I wonder, as critical national infrastructure, whether they almost see you as a bit of a whale.
Absolutely.
Because you have to have security.
Yes.
They know that if you are if they are the solution, you're going to pay, but you're
but
right.
I have to justify everything.
Absolutely.
So I think my main message is, help me justify it. Tell me what the risk is, in not just in kind of like, oh, there's been, you know, so many incidents and the average breach costs this. We know that. We absolutely want to understand, because we need these products, and that's why it's so great working in cybersecurity, how challenging it is and how these products and services are evolving. But unfortunately, there is quite a lot of snake oil and you know, products that you might get bitten by. So plain speaking.
Okay, fabulous. And then my actual final question is, at the end of every podcast, we ask our guests to share either their favourite book or a book that you're currently reading for the Cybermade Human Bookshelf, which is a really nice way of sharing a bit more insight into you as a person. Doesn't have to be related to cyber or what we've discussed.
Am I allowed two?
Yes.
I couldn't decide. One's fact, one's fiction.
Okay,
so
perfect.
That's kind of mine.
Yes.
So the cyber one is Sandworm
Okay.
by Adam Greenberg. It's I think it was written in about 2018, but I think it's very relevant in today, because it's about the Russian group that went after Ukraine with the NotPetya and taking down the energy in Ukraine, and obviously it hit lots of companies around the world, including Maersk. But again, it's about that human side. It talks about the group, and it talks about how it impacted the companies. So it's a very readable, factual cyber book. And the other one is a fiction book called Fundamentally. Sorry, I've forgotten who it's by. But it's less about cyber. It's more about Shamima. There was an ISIS bride. Do you remember Shamima Begum? Thank you. And so it's a novel based sort of around that kind of scenario. But it's about understanding what motivates people, I think. I mean, it's a funny book. It's actually a comedy book, but it's brilliantly written, and it just makes you see how these things can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, my recommendation for this episode is actually J.D. Vance's memoir, Fear Not. So I'm not a Trump supporter, but because of everything that's going on, I thought, let's listen to his audiobooks. I'm actually listening to it, called Hillbilly Elegy, which is all about him growing up in kind of Kansas. And actually it's quite a good insight, because a lot of it's very shocking, and I think it will give you a different view on what's going on potentially. I feel like it may have been a little bit of a strategic book. It might have put it out to appeal to certain people and appear more relatable. But either way, I think it's good to get as much knowledge as you can when making opinions on people. So that's what I'm currently listening to. And that's it for this episode. So thank you so much for joining us for a live episode, and thank you to our audience.